All right, up next is Dean Snell, the pioneer of direct-to-consumer golf ball market, and he's going to cut straight through the bullshit of the golf ball industry next on No Putts Given. Let's see if we can get him on the line.
I can see you guys are on like a
there you
screen.
go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Hey, your guys' weather looks about the same.
Yeah, we're at Pebble Beach right now.
It's like 40 degrees.
Yeah, it was 50. That's why I have my hockey sweatshirt on.
That's a pretty cool sweatshirt.
Yeah,
the NHL started last night, so.
I tell you what, but Dean Simulator and the quad in the background, Foresight better appreciate what they're getting for nothing here.
They're going to throw us a free course.
All right, so Dean, just give me the top 5 golf balls that you either invented or co-invented. So, so everybody out there kind of remembers that doesn't know who Dean Snell is.
Yeah, I think they've evolved over time. I think with the professional was the first major one that really brought cast urethane into golf. So that cast urethane technology is as good as it gets, and it's still been there. That was 1995. That really was one of the biggest steps of taking spin rates that have been pretty high, down into manageable spin rates, which helped increase distance. And it kind of kicked off the original launch of this whole USGA, we got to shorten the golf ball stuff that's been going on for 25, 30 years. So that was kind of one of the urethane one was a big one. And then the multi-layer solid golf balls, the Pro V1 was also a big one. Now, I wasn't there when Titleist launched the Pro V1, but I was there when we did the development of the Pro V1. So there were reasons why they took a long time. They can tell you about those if they want. That was another one. And then I think the PENTA golf ball was probably, the first 5-layer golf ball that came out that really was a accumulation of a lot of work with the tour players, working through the whole set. When I started, we used to just test 8-iron spin rate and driver spin rate. That's all it was. And then we kind of got into the wedge and 8-iron and driver. And when we went into PENTA, it was really the whole set, So the PENTA was one of the, in my opinion, was one of the best inventions that really took from a tour level, which these guys are that good, tee to green. I think those were the 3 big changes that's happened. Now the other golf balls that have followed with it have been minor tweaks, but the top 3 I think would be Professional, Pro V1, and PENTA. Those would be the main ones that really had a defining change to performance that could be seen by players.
2 things that kind of jumped out at me on that, and one is the fact that golf ball companies, it's pretty shocking that they only tested with an 8-iron, right, and a driver, and to think that there's so much more to be learned from every other club in the bag and the 5-layer ball from TaylorMade that you learn so much from, but also the fact that this is kind of a golf geek thing, but we take cast urethane for granted, I think, a little bit nowadays. But how long did that actually take? Just the learning process to create that. How long of a process was that when you were at Titleist?
Well, it was brutal, to be honest with you. The cast urethane chemistry part of it had actually started, the development of just the urethane had started before I started at Titleist. That was in 1990. Now, trying to make that into a golf ball is when I came in. So the engineering side to it, I can remember when we started, we had one little cavity and we injected 1 squirt of urethane, and I took a Q-tip, and I would sit there with a Q-tip while this thing went from a liquid to a solid in about 45 seconds. And when it got really close to a solid, I took the wound center, which was a professional center, and I put it in by hand till the stuff came up and overflowed half of the cavity. Then I poured liquid in the other side, took the Q-tip, flipped them over, took a C-clamp, and I ran to a freezer, and I put it in the freezer and waited 20 minutes and made 1 ball. And then took it out, and there was holes around the seam, and it was a mess, but it had a cover on it that made a golf ball. So
how centered was that core, though?
Well, I didn't have a calibrated hand for the first, but the basis of it was try to. So eventually what we do is we put mechanical stops so that lower down in, and it became 12 stations at a time. But there was another guy, John Collaborator, and myself that were the 2 engineers that were doing it. And when we took this into production, we actually, the goal was only to make 2,000 golf balls in a shift with 10% rejects. We had to teach the people in the manufacturer side how to do urethane. So extremely difficult process. Remember, cast urethane is A and B together, exotherm reaction, cross-links, so it's irreversible. So you can't remelt it. You can't reuse it like the thermoplastic urethane. It cross-links and creates very tough cover, so you can go a little thinner, and the durability got a lot better.
You might want to tell that to Costco on that Kirkland ball. But you were speaking a lot about engineering, and one of the things that I think people say, even when I met you the first time, you got an accent about as thick as clam chowder, as John Barber would say, and the perception is, hockey player, sweatshirt, hoodie, the last thing most people are going to think is this dude is a math genius, right? That's not like the first perception you get. So you were an engineer, went to college for engineering, plastics engineering, from what I remember. So obviously you were into math. When did you know that math was like a big part of your life? How old were you? And what was the first kind of thing that made you know math was something you were talented at?
Well, I was lucky in school. The math side to it came pretty easy to me. And in engineering, it's calculus 1, 2, 3, differential equations, class transforms. There's a lot of things that go into it. In the plastics engineering that I went into is also a lot of chemistry. So it's 7 out of 8 semesters in college that were chemistry. Physical chem, biochem, organic chem, inorganic chem. So all of that stuff together with the math side to it and the chemistry side to it, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. When I finished playing hockey, I worked for BF Goodrich Aerospace, designing parts for F-16 fighter planes. It was some kind of composites. There was some chemistry and some manufacturing into it. And then I answered an ad for TITLEIST for a quality engineer that was in my hometown. They sent my resume over to R&D, and then the next week I was hired. And I literally started on the cast urethane project because they didn't have any process to make the golf ball. So,
all right. So a lot of people don't know this about you, but you were a hockey player in college, right? Also played at a minor professional level for the Hershey Bears. Just have a quiz question for you. Do you know what the mascot's name was?
No. Was it Hershey Kiss?
No, it was Coco, because it was owned by the people that own the Hershey facility. And another quiz question for you, which I just learned because my kids went to the Hershey plant. What percentage of chocolate is in a Hershey's bar? What do you think, Tony?
10. Not much.
Zero chocolate. Real chocolate is in a Hershey's bar. Is that some shit or what, man?
Yeah. Well, I know.
There you go.
The best thing I remember I was kind of like a hockey player. I didn't play golf. I hated golf. And the only thing I remember is all the street lights were like Hershey Kisses, and the whole place smelled like.
Well, that gets me to this whole thing. Like, so you're an engineer, you go to school for that, plastics engineering, chemistry, all these things, and you get a job, working on F-16s and Blackhawks, and then you see this ad for TITLEIST that, the only experience you had in golf, from what I remember, is being in a fight on a fairway with your dad. So, like, what in the hell made you go, why did that TITLEIST ad pop off the page to you and go, man, this is a job I think I can do?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I lived in a Cushionette. It was a Cushionette company. The TITLEIST factory was about maybe a par 5 from my house. And I was working for BF Goodrich Aerospace and Defense, which was up in Marlborough, Mass., which was an hour and 15 minutes from my house. So, I was back and forth traveling every day and spending, 3 hours a day in a car, or whatever, if you guys want to.
Car.
Yeah. In a big car. And then, so this was a hometown. It was an engineering job. It was a hometown thing. I didn't really care about the R&D side to it. I just saw they had an open position that was, a par 5 from my house. So I answered it. And because of the work that I had done, at BF Goodrich, in the R&D side to it for Goodrich, they sent it over to R&D, and, I was fortunate.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like, what year was that when you started working at TITLEIST, Dean?
That was in 1990. And I left to go to TAYLORMADE in the beginning of 97.
So 30 years now, retrospectively looking back, right? You go, man, how the hell did I get here, right? I started at TITLEIST at that job ad, and now your life forked because of that ad in this direction, and now you have your own Wikipedia page, which is pretty crazy because I don't think Tony has his own Wikipedia page.
No. God, I hope not.
MyGolfSpy is actually listed on your Wikipedia page, which is pretty interesting, but
I didn't even know.
You didn't know you had a Wikipedia page?
Oh, you guys had told me this last time I talked to you. You said something about it.
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy ride, don't you think?
It is, but it's been fun. Titleist and TaylorMade, and again, I spent 18 years at TaylorMade, so two different kind of companies in the big corporate world with respect to golf. Two ways that they operate, two different types of management styles, which were pretty cool to see. You could really see the difference in them when you were in one building and in another building to really find out the differences in the company side. But I was very fortunate, and worked with all the top tour players in the world for the whole time. We started on the professional golf that I did. That was with Phil Mickelson, David Love, and Peter Costas. And then Tiger came in right when he was a pro. So I spent 2 weeks with Tiger and his dad, just hitting shots and letting him understand what was going to be the difference between Tour Bellata and urethane at the time, the professional. And then that transition with Mickelson on the Pro V1. He was the guy that I went to see with the first prototypes with the Pro V1. So and then with TaylorMade, their tour staff is outstanding. And then those guys are still real good friends of mine. I speak to them, frequently, see them when they do come to Boston. So, spent times at their homes, played in tournaments with them, and, they're really good. So if you ever need somebody to really fine tune different things, we work with amateur golfers where, hitting the ball in the air could be a success sometimes. With these guys, having a cover hardness be 3 short D points softer to make a spin check on a chip shot, they can tell the difference. So it's much different to work with, but they're that good.
Yeah, so that gets me to a different question, talking about that consistency thing, right? And the pro being able to know those type of very specific, small type of differences from ball to ball. And, obviously Tony has started something with this whole find it, cut it thing. And, the Callaway was one of the worst we saw in regards to quality control. So, I mean, how does that happen with a company like Callaway, in your opinion, where a pro knows those differences, right? Can feel and see, and, they know that what's going on. So how does that problem come to life with a big company like that if the pros are obviously can, kind of feel such minor differences, and we saw such drastic differences from ball to ball?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I'll tell you, the millions and millions and millions of golf balls that are made every day in a process that's not. You've got things inside that are melting and have moving parts. It's not easy to do all the time. There's pins and core pins that hold. Cores have gone low compression, mid compression, high compression. So try to make a 2-piece golf ball with a real soft core, and the core will explode during the process and blow out the cover. So getting down into ranges that start to push limits create manufacturing problems. So when you really go softer, it makes it tough to do. That core really wants to expand during the process, and it can have things move a little bit or shift a little bit. The tour side to it, when you asked about consistency, most of the time, in my experience with the tour guys, is their golf balls actually go through a little different inspection criteria. They're a little bit tighter, and they have to be. The balls are pulled for the USGA. The balls are pulled from the tour. When they do delisting stuff, that comes from the tour. They don't go out to Walmart and Kmart and buy golf balls and then test them and say, hey, the golf ball is heavy, or it's too fast, or it's illegal, it's delisted. They take them from the tour, and it's random. I think most of the major companies probably do X-ray stuff on them to try to see, some of that variable, and it probably wouldn't have those go. Most of the COIs and velocities that go out to the tour have to be checked before they go, because that's where they're going to be delisted.
Well, let's back up a little bit, about direct to consumer. So you go from Titleist, right, to TaylorMade, and what allowed you really to know that now is a time that I can start my own ball company? What was happening at that time prior to the day? Because you have to remember, when those balls were popping up like Monster and 3-Ball or whatever they were, that Titleist, they sued 10 companies.
More
right?
than that, I think.
Snell was not a part of that. Well, whatever. 10 was what we wrote about, right? But when we had so many readers reaching out to us going, will you guys test these direct consumer balls? And to be completely honest, we didn't know who the hell Dean Snell was at the time. Snell was just another ball, but very quickly we realized, wow, out of all these balls, this ball is really good, right? So all these balls, it happened all at the same time. So there was some signal, something happened in the ball industry that signaled to people like yourself or some of these other people that, hey man, we can get in the golf ball game. So what was that made you know you could do it?
Well, for me, it was the timing side to it that had to be right. It was something I had thought about previously, but my kids were still in college, and I wanted to make sure that they were done, paid for, school was all set, and they were finished before, you take a chance to go do something. So the opportunity to try to, I was in California. My family's from Massachusetts. The timing side to it, when my kids are out of school, I could go back home and be back home with family. I traveled so much. I spent a million miles on Delta, every year. It was just, it's a lot. Travel all over the world, working with players, different countries, building factories. And it was just, I just said, okay, I kind of just want to go home, and just kind of take it easy and let me see if this can work where this timing where the golf industry really, it was taking a dive. TaylorMade was a $1.2 billion company heading down to $800 million. Golf courses were closing, memberships canceled, golf clubs were getting introduced every 4 months, maybe 3 months, and people weren't buying, and waiting for the discounts and stuff like that. So I think the timing side to it fit where to say, if you can give something back to consumers. I've been blessed and fortunate to be with 2 top companies, design golf balls for the best players in the world, been to the parties when they won majors. I've been fortunate. So if I can give something back to the consumer to say, I got a lot of history and a lot of understanding of what's a good core, what's a good mantle, what's a good cover, how I can put them together and make it work. So if we could give this type of performance to the average golfer that actually buys the golf balls, the tour guys don't pay for them, if we could give that, maybe help drive the game, maybe somebody would go to the course and play 2 rounds instead of 1, make it affordable.
But what was happening at the foundries that allowed companies like Monster and 3Ball to just slap a logo on these and allow you to create a ball that could perform as well or better than some of the leading balls out there?
I'm pretty sure that Monster and three was it Lightning
3
Golf?
up.
3 up.
Yep, 3 up.
I'm pretty sure their R&D experience was very limited. There's factories overseas that you can go to and they'll make something for you. A lot of them will make the same ball for a lot of people and put a different stamp on them. That's a given. But for us to be different, I was trying to use the experience that I had for 25 plus years at the time to design it. So if you want to go to a factory in Taiwan or China and say, give me a core, they're going to give you a core that's going to be the cheapest rubber material you can buy. I'm going to go and I'm going to use a rubber material that's cross-linked with a special agent that drives the speed up when the compression gets softer.
All right, so we know rebranding of golf balls happens pretty often, right? You would know the prevalence of that more than we would, but let's get to the point. Do any of your balls exist under any other brands or logos like some of the other balls out there?
Not. If they do, if you find it, cut it, tell me, because I'd be bullshit at that. But it's because we spend time developing. We do R&D work. We send formulations to them. They send prototypes to us. We send the prototypes out to be independent tested. We put a lot of effort into it based on feedback that we get from consumers.
All right, which is what we thought about it. I didn't think your ball, there was another one. And Tony, hopefully for your sake, doesn't find that to be not true. But we know that is happening, right? So there are a lot of bullshit stories in the golf ball world. So which one pisses you off the most that you see?
From the direct to consumer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say there's more bullshit stories there.
Well, I don't know if I don't know what claims some of these companies make with respect. I mean, everybody on the box writes the same thing, spins less, goes further, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, for me, the story that really drives me crazy is the whole swing speed story and trying to push people into the low compression golf balls. I think it's the worst thing in the world that people can do. And everybody's just trying to push soft feel, and they're pushing out of performance. So you're taking people and you're throwing them into a level of performance that's not there. It's not going to be 20 yards longer, and it's not going to spin when you get to the green, so it's not going to be any good.
Yeah, going back and looking at, your history, you were saying soft was slow or shit long before we made a shirt that said it or made golf balls that said it. But, it is pretty frustrating to see how golf balls are marketed to consumers. And the reality is it's almost the exact opposite, which is, it's pretty shameful to see, because it is taking advantage of what the consumer thinks they need and giving them something that they don't really need.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the swing speed side to it is a big thing. The compression side to it used to be my pet peeve, which make me want to pull the shirt over the head and throw uppercut. It's not that the swing speed story is that way now. Anybody that wants to get better in golf is going to get better when they get from 100 yards and in. It's not going to be hitting your 220-yard drive, 221 yards. Then you got to finish the hole. You got to finish the hole, and you're finishing the hole with a golf ball that has no spin whatsoever, no performance. So you've gained, a few inches off the tee on a perfect drive, and that doesn't happen often. But you've given up everything the closer you get to the green.
Let's talk about cost versus quality to a degree, right? So we've talked about a lot of these guys in the direct-to-consumer space, and if you want to throw Costco in there, which I guess is probably reasonable at this point, the range of a direct-to-consumer ball right now is anywhere from $15 with Costco upwards of whatever Clear gets, right? Which is, I think, what, 80 to 100 a dozen. Exactly, right? Given what goes into producing a urethane cover and maintaining the quality of a product, I mean, how much it costs to make a golf ball. So in your mind, what's the cheapest, the lowest price point that a consumer should expect to pay for a urethane cover 3 or 4 piece ball? Oh, lost my Volvic. A 3 or 4 piece urethane ball and still get a quality product. Like, how low is too low?
Well, $27.99 for a 5. Probably perfect with free shipping. That would be so. There is a big difference in cost between a cast urethane and a thermoplastic urethane. There's no question. The cover material is probably about 4 or 5 times the cost alone, just the cover. The process side to it is very expensive. It's a continuous loop that goes around. It takes 20 minutes to make one ball. If you make a mistake, it's scrap. Callaway had this issue when they started their factory, their golf ball factory in 96 or 97, whenever they did it. And they ran into millions of dollars per quarter in scrap. The cast urethane process is tough. Cross-link, make a mistake, you don't get anything back. It's all scrap. Injection molding.
Unless you're Costco.
Well, so the Costco side to it, I know that I read some of the things that you guys put up and read some of the comments people make, and I know Titleist and TaylorMade got hammered for trying to be bullies, and I'm gonna be honest with you, that's not bullying what they're doing. I would use a scenario. You guys have spent how many years now doing what you're doing? 10 years. So you build up, 1 million followers and tons and tons of emails. And if somebody would come in tomorrow and take all that stuff and go do it, you'd be mad. So when the company did a lot of work on a 4-piece cast urethane golf ball, got introduced with TaylorMade, called the TP Red LDP. Now, we had multiple versions of it because the tour players don't always play the same ball. So we made multiple versions of it, and it was made in a factory that was made over in Korea. So, and I have patents on it. If someone comes and says, "Oh, just change that thickness by 10,000ths of an inch," and it's not the same ball, it may not be the same ball, but it still falls under the research work that we spent 5 years developing and a lot of money getting a patent on it and investing in it. So if someone just comes in and grabs a ball and goes off and goes and sells it, and they sell it at a ridiculously low price, those companies should be upset. It's not how you would want that to happen to your business if that was the case. So I think Titleist and TaylorMade had a reason to not like that approach. And I know the whole story behind it. We've never really gotten into it, but it was going to go away, in the marketing approach that they went of releasing just a small amount every month out of this volume. Let's just send this every month because they're not going to have any more. That lasted for a couple of years, and it worked. It created a buzz, but they sold out in no time. So when they sell out in no time like that, it's not a surprise that they don't have that many. In the golf ball world, I can tell you to the dozen how many they got made, and they released them every month because there's a capacity issue. The factory I was part of the design group that built it, so I know how many dozens can be made in that factory in the line. And everybody kind of thinks like, "Oh, you're putting them down." I'm not putting them down. I'm not being petty about the Costco thing. I just believe that if you back up if you back up and you go through the work that you did and you spent a lot of time doing it, and then someone comes in and just says, "Hey, I'll give you this, take it," you're gonna get slapped, and you're not gonna be able to do it anymore. So it's over, and it's moved to another factory now, and it's a different process and a different material.
Well, let me ask you this. It's kind of we kind of thought about this yesterday. I thought it was almost a little funny. You mentioned the red LDP. Certainly everything we've heard points to the origins of the original Kirkland coming from a ball that was a TaylorMade ball. So did you inadvertently help develop the Costco ball?
No, I didn't. I guess I did. Certainly when I worked at TaylorMade, but that's where it falls under. It's public knowledge. You can go on the patents that we have and look under TaylorMade and the 4-piece ball, and the inventor, and my name's there, and then take a look at the floor wears and the materials that are used, and take a look, and you can kind of get a feel for what it is. But I would probably go the opposite way and say, which Costco engineer developed that ball? Oh, do they have one?
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point too, right? Well, because you mentioned, right, Costco owns no intellectual property in the golf ball space, and a lot of your competitors in this direct-to-consumer space, I would argue most, if not all of them, own no intellectual property in the golf ball space. So, what is your response when you hear something like, we designed this ball, or we engineered this ball, and whether it's California or Germany or all these places where golf balls are supposedly being designed and engineered from guys who have no background in ball technology and hold no intellectual property whatsoever? I mean, what's the response to that? And what should the consumer think when he hears something like that?
Yeah, I'd like to sit in a room with them and say, what's the rubber system to use, or what's the cross-link percentage, and do you have neodymium or beryllium or nickel or cobalt, and what's the percent acid you have in the ionomer mantle you got? Like, ask questions like that, because pretty sure they probably wouldn't know the answer. But what happens with that, Tony, is over there in the factories, and there's some factories that are a little more shady than others, but over there in the factory side to it, they've made things for people, and then they just make things for people. So somebody could be giving them some kind of recipe to make a prototype in the past, or sell a golf ball in the past. Think about the Nike situation. Nike was at Phantom in China. That's where Nike made their golf balls. That's their tool, and that's their 338 dimple pattern. That's their thermoplastic urethane cover. They're not in golf balls anymore. So this factory knows how to make those kind of golf balls. They can now make them and go. Now Nike can do what they want. I don't know how many patents Nike filed for those kind of constructions, but a lot of times the factory might have the cover formulation. And remember, Bridgestone and Srixon have thermoplastic urethane covers as well as Nike did. And those three companies have 3 different thermoplastic urethane covers, 3 different formulations. And Bridgestone and Srixon are outstanding. They're very good companies. They're very good quality, and they're very high performance. They spent a lot of time developing these TPU covers, and I'm not sure Nike, when they were in the ball business, did the same to the same level, and that's kind of what you get.
So what's the trickle down in what we're seeing right now? So obviously we start with Costco having an impact and essentially being forced out of the factory they were in, right? So they got forced out of Nassau in Korea, and now are with what used to be Phantom in China, right? SM Parker now. Does that have a trickle down effect where other direct consumer manufacturers are being pushed out of that factory into other places, and is that ultimately going to impact both the number and quality of the offerings on the market?
I think it could. I mean, I'm not sure the total capacity from Phantom or SM Parker, the new name of it. The total capacity of their things are probably pretty good. You can make a lot of thermoplastic urethane. It's just another injection molding machine. You make 8 at a time in about 40 seconds, a cycle. You can really pump out high volumes. Paint machines aren't that hard to get. So it's a little bit different than the cast urethane. But I think if the volumes get really big, it could push other people out. I'm not really sure. I know there's other direct-to-consumer companies have golf balls made in that factory today. So we'll see if they're gone.
And you used that factory at one point, right? For MTB Red? What?
We did. Yeah, we had the MTB Red that we went there to use it, and in the feedback side to it that we get, obviously there's a cost side to it. The cost was cheaper, but our problem that we had was we got feedback on our MTB, our original one, and then black, and people were looking for something a little firmer and a little more spin. So that design that we had helped it, but we had problems with some of the little pin marks on the quality side to it. You could see the injection molded. When you make an injection molded cover, there's 4 or 5 pins on each end that hold the mantle in place. You inject first stage injection, then you pins. And second stage injection fills those pins. Well, if the vents are clogged or there's something wrong with it, that can cause quality defects, which you could feel the pin marks on the ball. We had a lot of people say that to us, and then we had some durability issues with the covers more than we had with the thermoset urethane. So we decided to do some more prototyping and go back to the thermoset urethane because with the MTBX that we designed, which in the testing side to it really separated itself out as a better product.
Is that one of your biggest challenges when you do have quality issues like that coming from a factory, sort of catching them as quickly as possible so that they don't leak out to your customers like some of them did with the MTB Red?
Yeah, it is. So the factory that we use now is a different quality system than the factory we had with MTB Red. We have people that work there that are in there and release. So the golf balls don't get sent to us, for us to inspect when we get them here. They're done there. They're done at every stage. And it doesn't get released till the next stage until it passes the quality side to it. Hey, when I started in golf, a Tour Balata dozen golf balls, if you bought a dozen Tour Balatas and you measured, the compression range was 18 points within a dozen. And that was at TITLEIST, which is one of the top, quality companies out there. So 18 points difference. Today's specs for cores and mantles are plus or minus 4, where they're in the tighter range. Will you get a core material that gets released and it's at the lower side and one slips through it and it's 9 points difference instead of 8 max? It could happen, but that's not measurable in performance out there to pretty much anybody. So 18 points would be a big difference. 8 points is extremely small, and if it shifts a little bit on that 8 points, you're really in a range that's not going to be seen from a performance side to it. That's big difference.
All right, a couple other things real quick before we go, and that is this whole talk about the rollback. Do you think it's going to happen, and if so, how does that affect Snell Golf?
The rollback's been talked about since '95, and I've been part of this discussion with the USGA for quite a few years. We actually made golf balls and sent them to them, and it's going to be a huge issue if it ever goes to the mass, to the public. On tour, if you want to do something like that, you're gonna make the DJs and the Kepkas and the long hitters win far more often. So if you take a golf ball that these guys hit today, remember the golf ball has a speed that's controlled by the USGA. The golf ball has a distance that's controlled by the USGA. So these guys playing the same clubs and the same balls hit the golf ball, 20 miles an hour faster. It's the player that's hitting it 20 miles an hour faster. That's probably 60 yards in difference. So if you take a golf ball now and you say, let's roll this back 25 yards, you're pushing everybody back 25 yards. So now Dustin's going to hit an 8-iron and everybody else is going to hit a 4-iron. So the consistency of close proximity to the pin is going to get much greater for a 4-iron than it is an 8-iron.
Well, you brought up a great point. Like the USGA has a limit on things, right? So what does that do? I mean, what does the golf space look like over the next 10 years with that limit set, kind of that ceiling? Where does development come? Where is the next technological advancement in golf balls when there's a limit?
Well, this discussion of distance is a tour problem. It's not I play. I'm going to play when this is over. With a buddy of mine, and it's degrees out, and he play white tees. He's not saying, hey, this course is too long, it's obsolete for me. So it's a tour issue. They're freaks of nature. The fitness side to it. The distance issue with the USGA today is, in my opinion, 4 things. It's the launch conditions of the golf ball being lower launch. Higher launch, lower spin has increased distance. That's what pinnacles used to be. So the golf balls aren't any different than the old pinnacles with respect to launch, but the tour balls now launch like pinnacles. So that's why they go that far. The drivers are sweet spots like this big. The heads are huge on them. they've controlled COR a little bit. The players are much stronger, and then the fairways, and the ball's still rolling in Phoenix from last year, I think. So, it's ridiculous how far. So I did this study. I know you guys got time, but I did this study at TaylorMade. I took the top 5 players in the world at La Costa. They used to have an event at La Costa every year. And I studied their driver distance. And the next year it rained and the course was soft. And there was 27 yards difference in distance from those 5 guys one year to the next.
Yeah, Tony and I came up with a solution for the distance problem. It's just don't cut the grass. You know what I mean? Or it's as simple as that, right?
Shape the fairways and be a little thicker. Than on Monday when the tour is over, let us go play, because we don't have.
Well, if everything's maxed out, right? Why is there going to be a 2020 ball from any company?
Well, the only thing that's maxed out is the distance. I've always been I spoke to the USGA about this multiple times to say, why do you have a velocity test? You got a distance test. Nobody ever sits on the tee and say, I just hit that ball 255 feet per second. They say, they hit. Yeah. So velocity ties to distance. So if you only want the ball to go so far, they don't use the velocity test in the distance test. They measure your ball, your COR that you got, and they plug that in and run algorithms on distance based on different spins, and they come up with how far the ball could go at your ball speed. So if your distance is what your factor is, let's make that it. If you put a distance cap on it, you might be able to make a golf ball for the slower swing speed players go further, but the tour guys would never hit it. You might be able to make a golf ball spin more, and the tour guys would never hit it. They're out there at the end, but the rest of the consumer field is not anywhere near the end. So there's room to do that if they let's say you take away the speed part of the USGA argument. And now I can make a golf ball that at slow swing speed goes fast. It's going to help the slower guys go further. But at the high swing speed, it doesn't go fast. So those guys would never play it. Now you're helping.
And right now we see a direct correlation between that, right? Swing speed and distance, So how do you create a ball at a slower swing speed that goes farther but doesn't go farther at a higher swing speed?
You have to read the patent.
You got a new patent coming out?
I tell you that, I got to come to Virginia and kill you.
Well, if it's patent, it's public information. So do you got a new patent?
There's not patents that are out right now on it, but there's ways to do it, and you guys have too many followers for me to tell that secret, because we'll see it in someone else's portfolio. But yeah, there's ways to do that. But right now, you're limited to be able to do that because the USGA has a velocity.
Gotcha. I guess that leads us to this last question. And, if Snell Golf didn't exist, what ball do you play?
I would probably play TP5X. Yeah.
Why is that?
Because I mentioned earlier about PENTA being, one of the top things for me. I work at TaylorMade, so I got a little bit of a allegiance to TaylorMade. There's friends of mine still there. But the golf ball performance, they've made some minor changes to it since I've left, and they've done a nice job with it. It's a nice product. And to me, I know I could tell you the 5-iron spin rates, the 3. I could tell you what it is throughout the whole set for the golf ball, and understanding what that is. And it's a very nice product. That's what I would choose for it. There's no shortage in distance on it. And then you get performance, tee to green with it.
So why aren't there more 5-piece balls on the market?
Well, there's some patents on it that prevent that. So golf ball patents are good for 17 years or 20 years from the day you do the application side to it. So it's only 2019, so it's only 9 years. So there's still a decent amount left. And when we did those patents at TaylorMade, we covered a lot of stuff in the 5-wheel. We did a lot of materials and a lot of design and a lot of development to try to get that final product. And if you go read it, check out the description side to it, read the materials in there. It's huge. So it's covered. It's a very strong golf ball patent.
All right, well, that's No Putts Given, episode 18. Thanks for coming on, Dean Snell. We appreciate it. And until next time, we out.
Thanks,
Thanks, Dean.